Motorcycles are supposed to deliver freedom, excitement, and value. But sometimes, manufacturers push things way too far. Whether it's slapping a premium badge on a mediocre bike, over-engineering something no one asked for, or simply believing their own hype, some motorcycles hit the market with price tags that left riders shaking their heads. From futuristic experiments to luxury machines built more for bragging rights than performance, these bikes didn't just cost a fortune, they often failed to justify it. Buyers who took the plunge found themselves with motorcycles that were gorgeous to look at, or interesting to discuss, but frustrating to actually own. And for many, the price tag became a lasting regret. In this countdown, we're looking at the 8 most overpriced motorcycles ever made. These are the bikes that prove not every dollar spent in the showroom is money well spent. Number 8. Harley-Davidson CVO models. For many riders, Harley-Davidson is already considered a premium brand. But with its custom vehicle operations, CVO line, Harley took the idea of exclusivity and cranked the price tags into the stratosphere. CVO bikes were meant to be the pinnacle of Harley's craftsmanship. Hand-finished paint, chrome everywhere, bigger engines, and all the bells and whistles. They were also some of the most overpriced motorcycles the company ever built. The CVO program started in 1999, with Harley producing limited edition, factory-customized versions of its most popular models. The Road Glide, Street Glide, Road King, and ultra-classic Electra Glide. On paper, it sounded appealing. Buyers didn't have to spend months customizing their bikes after purchase. They could get a show bike directly from Harley's factory. The catch? The price. CVO models often carried price tags that were $10,000 to $15,000 higher than their standard versions. For example, while a standard Street Glide might cost around $22,000, the CVO Street Glide could easily push past $40,000 once dealer markups were factored in. What did buyers actually get for all that extra money? Paint jobs, a few chrome accents, upgraded infotainment, and maybe a slightly bigger engine. Performance gains were minimal, nowhere near enough to justify the massive premium. Worse, Harley churned out new CVO editions every year, each one touted as exclusive. But with thousands produced annually, they were hardly rare. Buyers who thought they were investing in something collectible quickly realized resale values didn't hold up. In fact, many used CVOs depreciated faster than their standard counterparts, leaving owners upside down on loans for motorcycles they thought would retain their value. For Harley-Davidson, the CVO line was a financial win in the short term. Loyalists with deep pockets lined up to buy them, and the massive profit margins helped prop up Harley during difficult years. But for many riders, especially those who paid premium prices, CVO bikes became symbols of Harley's excess. Motorcycles that were more about image than substance. Even mechanically, the upgrades weren't groundbreaking. The Screamin' Eagle engines offered more displacement, but reliability issues with some models, like the twin-cam engines in the 2000s, left owners with costly repair bills on top of their already inflated purchase price. Meanwhile, aftermarket upgrades on a standard Harley could achieve the same performance for far less money. Today, CVO Harleys are still produced, and they still carry eye-watering prices. Some collectors love them, but the broader market sees them for what they are: factory customs with inflated costs that deliver little beyond prestige. The Harley-Davidson CVO line proves that exclusivity often comes at a price, but not always with value. For riders who bought in, many walked away with bikes that looked flashy but felt overpriced the moment they saw how little their resale value held up. In the world of overpriced motorcycles, the CVO line stands as one of the clearest examples of a brand charging far more for style than substance. Number 7. Ducati Desmosedici RR. When Ducati announced the Desmosedici RR in 2006, it promised riders the closest thing to a MotoGP bike ever made available for the street. Based on Ducati's race-winning GP6 machine, the Desmosedici RR was a limited production superbike that immediately captured global attention. With a price tag of around $72,500, it also became one of the most overpriced motorcycles Ducati, or anyone, ever built. On paper, the Desmosedici RR was incredible. Its 989 cubic centimeters V4 engine produced nearly 200 horsepower, wrapped in carbon fiber bodywork and fitted with race-derived Öhlins suspension and Brembo brakes. Ducati limited production to just 1,500 units worldwide, ensuring exclusivity. For collectors and hardcore Ducati fans, it was a dream come true. But when the hype faded, the reality set in. The Desmosedici RR was breathtaking, but not worth the astronomical price tag. The first problem was practicality. This was a race bike barely tamed for the street. It was loud, uncomfortable, and impractical for anything resembling real-world riding. Long-distance comfort? Forget it. Commuting? A nightmare. Even on the track, its performance, while staggering, was soon overshadowed by newer superbikes costing a fraction of the price. Within just a few years, the $72,500 Desmosedici RR was being outperformed by production models like the BMW S 1000 RR, which retailed for less than one-third of the cost. Then there was the cost of ownership. Maintenance schedules were strict and expensive. Valve adjustments, in particular, cost thousands of dollars, and parts availability was limited. Owners often complained that keeping the Desmosedici RR running was like maintaining an actual race bike. Constant attention, constant expense. Many ended up parking theirs in garages as display pieces rather than actually riding them. Resale value didn't hold up as expected either. While the bike has since found a niche as a collectible, early owners who thought it would instantly appreciate in value were disappointed. In the late 2000s, used Desmosedici RRs were selling well below their original price. For riders who had poured over $70,000 into owning the ultimate Ducati, that was a bitter pill to swallow. For Ducati, the Desmosedici RR was a halo project, a marketing tool designed to show off engineering prowess. But financially, it was a gamble that didn't pay off in terms of sustainable sales or long-term prestige. Instead, it highlighted just how overpriced motorcycles can become when exclusivity and hype take precedence over practicality and value. Today, the Desmosedici RR has a cult following among collectors, and clean examples are starting to climb in value. But in its day, it was an overpriced, overhyped machine that left many owners regretting their purchase. For Ducati fans who stretched their finances to own one, it became a lesson in the dangers of buying into the dream of exclusivity. In the world of overpriced motorcycles, the Ducati Desmosedici RR stands as a shining and cautionary example, a technological masterpiece that came with a price tag no one could truly justify. Number 6. Honda Rune. When Honda released the Rune in 2004, it was meant to be a rolling work of art. Inspired by the T2 concept bike that had wowed crowds at motorcycle shows, the Rune was unlike anything else on the road. A radical, futuristic cruiser powered by Honda's legendary flat-six engine. But while it succeeded in turning heads, it failed spectacularly in offering value. At nearly $27,000 new, the Rune quickly earned a place among the most overpriced motorcycles ever made. The Rune was built with meticulous attention to detail. It shared the Goldwing's 1,832 cubic centimeters flat-six engine, which delivered smooth, reliable power. The unique trailing link front suspension was a marvel of engineering, designed to improve ride quality and control. Its flowing lines, massive chrome forks, and futuristic styling made it look like a concept bike that had somehow escaped the design studio and landed in dealerships. On a purely aesthetic level, the Rune was stunning. But the problem started as soon as riders looked past the styling. At nearly 900 pounds, the Rune was enormously heavy, making low-speed maneuvering a chore. Despite being marketed as a cruiser, it was awkward to handle in city traffic, clumsy in parking lots, and intimidating for all but the most experienced riders. Comfort, surprisingly, wasn't its strong suit either. The stretched-out ergonomics and firm suspension made long rides less enjoyable than Honda's touring bikes. And while the flat-six delivered smooth power, performance wasn't thrilling enough to justify the Rune's outrageous price tag. Riders expecting the ultimate blend of comfort and performance found themselves disappointed. Then, there was the practicality issue. The Rune had almost no storage capacity, limited options for customization, and wasn't designed for touring. It was, essentially, a showpiece. Owners who wanted a motorcycle they could ride daily often found themselves leaving it in the garage. At $27,000, that was a bitter realization. Financially, Honda lost big on the Rune. Unlike most bikes, which share parts across models to keep costs down, the Rune used many unique low-production components. Manufacturing costs were extremely high, and with sales sluggish, dealers struggled to move units. Many Runes sat on showroom floors for years, eventually sold at steep discounts. For Honda, a company renowned for practicality and mass-market success, the Rune was an uncharacteristic misstep. It proved that even the most reliable brand in motorcycling could fall victim to overestimating how much riders were willing to pay for style over substance. Today, the Rune enjoys a small cult following. Collectors admire its rarity and daring design, and pristine examples can fetch high prices on the used market. But in its time, it was one of the most overpriced motorcycles ever produced. A bike that cost too much, offered too little, and left both Honda and many buyers regretting the gamble. The Honda Rune remains a reminder that sometimes manufacturers mistake bold design for real value. And when they do, the result is a motorcycle that looks incredible, but carries a price tag that no amount of chrome can justify. Number 5. Confederate FA-13 Combat Bomber. Confederate Motorcycles, now rebranded as Curtiss Motorcycles, built its reputation on producing wild, aggressive, and ultra-exclusive machines. None captured that ethos more than the FA-13 Combat Bomber, a bike that carried a jaw-dropping price tag of around $155,000. Yes, you read that right. Over $150,000 for a motorcycle. On exclusivity alone, it was one of the most overpriced production bikes ever built. The FA-13 combat bomber looked like something straight out of a dystopian sci-fi movie. With its all-billet aluminum frame, minimalist design, and stealthy matte finishes, it exuded menace. Power came from a 2,163 cubic centimeter air-cooled V-twin, producing a claimed 150 horsepower and 160 pound-feet of torque. At around 500 pounds, the power-to-weight ratio was impressive, and the bike could easily outgun most cruisers on the road. For pure wow factor, the combat bomber delivered. But here's the problem. The price-to-value equation made no sense. For $155,000, you could buy a Ducati Panigale V4R, a Kawasaki Ninja H2R, and a top-of-the-line Harley-Davidson, and still have change left over. All three of those bikes offered superior performance, more practical usability, and, crucially, dealer support and parts availability. By contrast, the combat bomber was more boutique art project than motorcycle. Its exclusivity also came with drawbacks. Confederate built only a handful of these machines, meaning finding parts, service, or even technicians familiar with them was a nightmare. Owners who actually rode them often reported issues with refinement, vibration, and build quirks that betrayed the six-figure price. For most buyers, the combat bomber ended up being more of a conversation piece in a private garage than a bike to actually ride. Resale value was another sore spot. Unlike established exotic brands like Ducati or MV Agusta, Confederate didn't have the global recognition to sustain secondary market prices. Many combat bombers ended up selling for far less than their original MSRP, leaving early adopters with massive losses. From a brand perspective, the combat bomber highlighted Confederate's struggle to balance artistry with practicality. The company wanted to build motorcycles that were equal parts sculpture and performance, but the price tags alienated 99% of riders. Instead of positioning Confederate as an innovative boutique brand, bikes like the FA-13 combat bomber cemented its reputation as inaccessible and impractical, an expensive indulgence for a tiny handful of wealthy buyers. Even today, when collectors look back at the combat bomber, it's admired for its design boldness, but criticized for its absurd cost. It wasn't the fastest, most reliable, or most advanced motorcycle on the planet, but it was one of the most expensive. And that imbalance between value and price is exactly why it belongs on this list. The Confederate FA-13 combat bomber proves that exclusivity and artistry don't always justify astronomical prices. While it may look like a masterpiece of industrial design, for most riders, it will forever remain a wildly overpriced machine that offered bragging rights, but little else. Number 4. MV Agusta F4 Claudio. MV Agusta has always thrived on exclusivity. The Italian brand, famous for producing some of the most beautiful motorcycles in the world, often positions itself as the Ferrari of two wheels. But with the F4 Claudio, introduced in 2018, MV Agusta may have gone a little too far. Priced at nearly $83,000, this limited edition superbike quickly became one of the most overpriced motorcycles of the modern era. The F4 Claudio was named in honor of Claudio Castiglione, the visionary who helped revive MV Agusta in the 1990s. It was based on the F4 RC, itself a high-spec version of the already stunning F4. The Claudio edition came with every possible upgrade: carbon fiber bodywork, titanium exhaust, forged wheels, and a race kit that boosted the 998 cubic centimeter inline-4 engine to a claimed 212 horsepower. On paper, it was breathtaking. On the showroom floor, it was irresistible to collectors. But here's the issue. Underneath the exotic paint and carbon, it was still the same F4 that had been around for nearly 2 decades. The F4's design, while beautiful, was long in the tooth by 2018. Competitors like the Ducati Panigale 5.4, Aprilia RSV4, and BMW S1000RR were offering more advanced electronics, better ergonomics, and often superior performance, at half or even a third of the price. For riders who actually wanted to use their bike on the track or street, the F4 Claudio offered little value beyond exclusivity. Yes, it was fast. Yes, it was gorgeous. But was it $83,000 fast? Not really. A BMW S1000RR or Aprilia RSV4 factory could match or beat its lap times for a fraction of the cost. Even Ducati's exotic Panigale V4R was cheaper while delivering cutting-edge technology. The Claudio also carried the typical MV Agusta baggage: spotty dealer support, expensive maintenance, and questionable reliability compared to Japanese rivals. Buyers were essentially paying a massive premium for bragging rights and a plaque with a serial number. For many, that made it feel more like a piece of garage art than a true superbike. Resale value was another sticking point. While limited-run Ducatis often appreciate in value, MV Agusta bikes rarely achieve the same collectible status outside of niche circles. Early F4 Claudio owners hoping for instant appreciation were disappointed when resale prices dipped below MSRP. A painful realization for anyone who dropped nearly 6 figures. For MV Agusta, the Claudio was less about volume and more about prestige. It reminded the world that MV could still build jaw-dropping machines. But financially, it highlighted the company's reliance on ultra-expensive halo models that few people could buy, and even fewer could justify. Today, the F4 Claudio remains a striking piece of motorcycle art, but also a symbol of excess. It's beautiful, rare, and undeniably special. But compared to the performance per dollar value offered by its rivals, it's one of the most overpriced motorcycles ever sold. The MV Agusta F4 Claudio proves a hard truth. Beauty and exclusivity can command high prices. But when technology and performance don't keep pace, the numbers stop making sense. It's a bike that collectors may admire, but for most riders, it was an $83,000 indulgence with very little real-world value. Number 3. Harley-Davidson Ultra Limited CVO Anniversary Edition. Harley-Davidson has always known how to capitalize on heritage. Few brands in the motorcycle world can charge such steep premiums for nostalgia and chrome. But with the ultra-limited CVO Anniversary Edition, Harley pushed that formula to the extreme. And the result was one of the most overpriced motorcycles ever to leave their factory. Released as part of Harley's 115th anniversary celebration in 2018, this CVO model came with all the trimmings: a Milwaukee 8-117 engine, hand-finished custom paint, a premium audio system, and every touring feature Harley could throw at it. The problem wasn't the bike itself, it was the price. At nearly $43,000, this motorcycle cost more than many new cars and almost double the price of Harley's standard touring models. On paper, the value proposition made little sense. Yes, the 117 cubic inch engine offered slightly more power than Harley's standard lineup, but the performance gains were modest at best. The real differentiators were cosmetic, unique paint schemes, badges, and a certificate of authenticity. Buyers weren't paying for engineering or innovation. They were paying for exclusivity and bragging rights. That strategy worked for some. A small group of devoted Harley enthusiasts snapped them up, eager to own a piece of factory custom history. But for many others, it highlighted the growing disconnect between Harley's pricing and the actual value riders received. At a time when Japanese and European manufacturers were offering cutting-edge performance and technology for much less, Harley's anniversary, CVO, came across as a cash grab. The resale market was even harsher. Unlike truly limited edition motorcycles that appreciate over time, most CVO models, including the anniversary edition, depreciated rapidly. Owners who thought they were buying a future collectible often discovered their $43,000 bike was worth thousands less within just a few years. For a company that had once thrived on its resale strength, this was a bad look. Harley itself wasn't immune to the fallout. CVO sales brought in high margins, but they also fueled criticism that Harley was more focused on milking loyalists than attracting new riders. As younger buyers entered the market, they balked at the idea of paying luxury car prices for a motorcycle that wasn't significantly better than Harley's standard lineup. Instead, many looked to cheaper Japanese cruisers or entirely different segments like adventure bikes. The ultra-limited CVO Anniversary Edition stands as an example of Harley's tendency to overplay its hand. While it was undeniably a well-built, comfortable touring bike with all the bells and whistles, its bloated price tag made it feel like a marketing stunt rather than a serious motorcycle. For many riders, it symbolized Harley's struggles in the modern market, clinging to heritage while ignoring the value equation. Today, the Anniversary Edition remains a curiosity. Some collectors appreciate the hand-finished details, but in the used market, it's just another overpriced Harley with fancy paint. For riders who shelled out $43,000 expecting exclusivity and future value, the disappointment lingers. The ultra-limited CVO Anniversary Edition proves that sometimes nostalgia costs far more than it's worth. And when the price climbs higher than the value, even loyal riders start to question whether the brand has lost its way. Number 2. Ecose Titanium Series FETI-XX. When it comes to jaw-dropping price tags, few motorcycles can compete with the Ecose Titanium Series FETI 20th. Hand-built by the boutique manufacturer Ecose Moto Works, this ultra-exclusive bike carried an almost unbelievable price of around $300,000 when it debuted in the mid-2000s. With only 13 units produced, it instantly became a symbol of excess. A motorcycle designed more for the super-rich than for riders who actually wanted to experience the open road. The FETI-XX looked like a sculpture more than a machine. Its frame was constructed entirely from titanium, a material that's both incredibly strong and notoriously expensive to work with. Power came from a 2,409 cubic centimeter billet aluminum V-twin, producing a claimed 225 horsepower. Impressive numbers for a cruiser-style machine. Every detail was bespoke. Carbon fiber wheels, high-end Öhlins suspension, and exotic finishes that made it look like something out of a billionaire's toy catalog. But here's the problem. For all its exclusivity and flash, the FETI-XX didn't justify its astronomical cost. At $300,000, you could buy a Lamborghini Aventador or a Ferrari 812 Superfast. both with far more engineering pedigree, broader usability, and resale security. On the motorcycle side, you could purchase 10 Ducati Panigale V4Rs, or a garage full of top-tier superbikes, all of which would outperform the FETIXX on the track or road. While the FETIXX offered exclusivity, it lacked the kind of innovation or practicality to make it meaningful. Its massive engine produced brute power, but the bike wasn't designed for handling finesse. Reviews at the time noted that it was more of a showpiece than a serious rider's machine. The ergonomics weren't comfortable for long rides, and serviceability was a nightmare given the bespoke components and microscopic production numbers. Ecosay marketed the FETIXX as the pinnacle of motorcycle luxury, and in fairness, it did succeed as a status symbol. For the handful of ultra-wealthy buyers, owning one wasn't about value, it was about saying they had something no one else in the world did. But for anyone measuring cost against capability, the numbers simply didn't add up. The resale market underscored this reality. Unlike Ferraris or Ducatis, which often appreciate in value or at least hold their worth, many Ecosay models struggled to find buyers willing to pay anywhere near their original MSRP. For most riders, the FETIXX wasn't even on the radar. It was a fantasy bike that served little purpose outside of being a conversation starter at a private collection. From a broader perspective, the FETIXX highlighted the growing absurdity of boutique motorcycles aimed at the ultra-rich. It wasn't about pushing technology forward or delivering groundbreaking performance. It was about exclusivity, plain and simple. And while exclusivity can justify a premium, asking $300,000 for a motorcycle that offered little practical advantage over machines costing 1/10 of that made the FETIXX one of the most overpriced motorcycles ever built. The Ecosay Titanium Series FETIXX stands as the ultimate example of style over substance. Gorgeous, rare, and meticulously crafted. Yes, but hopelessly out of step with reality for anyone outside the billionaire class. Number 1. Neiman Marcus Limited Edition Fighter. If there's one motorcycle that epitomizes the term overpriced, it's the Neiman Marcus Limited Edition Fighter. This bike, unveiled in 2008 by the luxury retailer Neiman Marcus in partnership with Confederate Motorcycles, now Curtis, carried a staggering sticker price of $110,000. But that wasn't the end of the story. When one eventually hit auction years later, it sold for an eye-watering $11 million, cementing its place as the most overpriced motorcycle ever made. The Fighter's design was radical, even by boutique standards. With an exposed aluminum frame, skeletal bodywork, and a steampunk meets industrial aesthetic, it looked more like a prop from a futuristic action movie than a road-going motorcycle. Underneath, it used a 1,996 cubic centimeter air-cooled V-twin engine, producing around 120 horsepower. Decent, but far from earth-shattering given the astronomical cost. Its claimed top speed of 190 miles per hour was impressive, but plenty of mass-produced superbikes could match or exceed that performance for less than 1/10 of the price. So what were buyers really paying for? Exclusivity and design. Only 45 units of the Fighter were ever built, making it rarer than most exotic cars. The craftsmanship was meticulous, with hand-machined components and a frame carved from a single block of aluminum. To collectors and ultra-wealthy buyers, It was marketed as a rolling piece of art. To the rest of the world, it looked like a stunning but wildly impractical toy. And impractical it was. The seating position was aggressive and uncomfortable, the suspension harsh, and the lack of wind protection made long rides unbearable. This wasn't a bike designed to be ridden cross-country. It was designed to sit in a showroom or a billionaire's garage. Serviceability was another issue. With its bespoke components and limited production, parts were nearly impossible to source, and few mechanics knew how to work on them. The ultimate absurdity came when one fighter crossed the auction block for over $11 million. While that price was driven more by collector hype than intrinsic value, it cemented the fighter's reputation as the most overpriced motorcycle in history. For perspective, $11 million could buy you multiple Bugatti Chirons, a small fleet of Ducati Panigalis, and still leave enough cash for a luxury yacht. For Neiman Marcus, the fighter was more of a marketing stunt than a serious motorcycle project. It grabbed headlines, stirred conversation, and reinforced the retailer's image as a purveyor of ultra-luxury goods. But for the motorcycle industry, it was an example of how far brands could stretch the definition of value when targeting the wealthiest buyers. Today, the Neiman Marcus fighter is remembered less as a motorcycle and more as a curiosity, a case study in excess. It rides the fine line between machine and art piece, but as a functional motorcycle, it offered very little compared to bikes costing under $20,000. The Neiman Marcus Limited Edition fighter is the undisputed champion of overpriced motorcycles. Beautiful? Yes. Rare? Absolutely. But worth $110,000, let alone $11 million? Not by any standard of performance, practicality, or value. It stands as the ultimate reminder that sometimes price has nothing to do with worth. Motorcycles are meant to embody freedom, performance, and value. Yet these machines proved that a hefty price tag doesn't always mean a better ride. From luxury gimmicks to collector hype, the most overpriced bikes remind us that true worth lies on the road, not in exclusivity or auctions. Sometimes, the best rides cost far less.